Hey, it's Dr. T, and this episode we're answering the question, why do we need unions? First of all, what is a union? Well, a union is simply a group, a collection of workers who organize to maximize their power against their employer and to use that power to create better and more fair working conditions. And unions historically have been a very important counterbalance to people with power and wealth who employ them and have, before unions, been able to set the conditions of work with impunity. Just quick short history of unions in the US. The earliest union was formed in 1794 in Philadelphia, and it was a shoemakers union. Unions gained steam here in the United States in the early 1900s as well as around the world. And in the early history, there was a lot of division within unions, and in particular, white men wanting to exclude Black men and all women. One of the reasons they wanted to do that was not just bigotry or patriarchy, it was that because of racial discrimination and gender discrimination or patriarchy, Black men and women of all racial ethnic groups were paid a lot less than white men were. And so white men wanted to keep them out because if they came in, they were afraid that that would have a depressing effect on their own wages. So they were trying to keep their wages high by excluding people who were routinely paid a lot less. This differential paying of workers in the workplace has been a classic tactic used by employers to try to divide and conquer workers, to keep them from coming together and recognizing their common economic interests. Pitting workers against them dilutes their power, destroys their power. As I said, this is still happening. Often what happens now, though, is it's along racial lines, that employers will exploit racial bigotry. They've been particularly successful in doing this in the South, in keeping people from unionizing. They play on racial stereotypes and white fears and keep workers divided enough, at least, that they won't vote in a union. Why do we need unions is the question. Unions have done a lot for people. Higher wages tops the list, but not just higher wages, benefits, things like healthcare, dental, vision. A lot of times people think about the benefits as extras. Oh, that's just something you kind of got on top of your wages. No, unions were strategic over the course of history. Instead of asking for increases in wages, they would say, okay, we want more of other things. We want more paid benefits. We want things like paid sick leave. We want paid vacation time. We want a shorter workday. So the unions are the ones that brought you the 8-hour workday and the 40-hour work week. Prior to that, if you look across the 1800s, it was not uncommon to have people working 18 hours a day, 6 or 7 days a week in horrible conditions. So those are the things that unions have done. They've also protected people from being fired arbitrarily. In most circumstances where unions are involved, there has to be a due process, like in our criminal justice system, in order for someone to be fired from their job. There has to be a reason. There has to be just cause. Workplace safety is another very important thing that people often overlook. Folks died on the workplace quite regularly at young ages because the jobs they were doing were dangerous. I'm not just talking coal mining, I'm talking your basic factory job. People did not survive in those workplaces because they were quite dangerous. So union membership really reached its high point in the United States in the mid-1900s after World War II. It has been declining since that time frame, particularly in the 60s into the 70s. It is now about half of what it was in the early 80s. Right now, it's just over 10% of workers in this country belong to a union. And so with so few people, probably you're someone who isn't in a union. And you might be thinking, why do I care? Why should I care about unions? It has nothing to do with me. I'm not in a union. I don't have the option to be in a union. No one's ever mentioned union. Why do I care? Because unions made lives better for everyone. When unions are able to raise the wages in one industry or one factory in one town, then the other employers have to follow suit if they want to get good laborers to come and work for them. If they are limiting the workday, if they are demanding benefits, other organizations, other corporations, other employers have then put those benefits in place, raised wages, created workplace safety because they don't want to lose out on getting good quality workers. So whenever unions raise the bar for their members, they raise the bar for all of us. We all benefit. There is also a long history of union busting in this country. Employers and even the government at the state and federal level pushing back on unions. So using the military, the National Guard, the police, killing people who were on strike. It is a very bloody labor history that we have in this country. Union busting has happened not just by corporations, but by government people as well. So Ronald Reagan was a very famous union buster. One of the first things he did as president was destroy the Air Traffic Controllers Union. They went on strike to protest the conditions because air traffic controller is one of the most stressful jobs in our economy. They wanted better working conditions and they wanted better pay and compensation for that stress. And Reagan said, nope, I'll just fire you all and hire new people. So when he did that, it gave other people, other corporations, other employers permission to really go hard at union busting. So there are still people trying to prevent unions from forming and trying to break up the unions that already exist. One of the ways that this has been done, and we need politicians to support them in this. So this has been a longstanding project of the political right and Republicans, is to pass what they call right to work laws. Now, this is where you get Orwellian newspeak, turning it upside down on its head. What it means is if you are in a union organization, meaning that you're in a workplace where unions have a presence, they've negotiated contracts, etc., typically what happens is you have to join the union and you pay dues because your dues support the work of the union. It is a full-time job for unions to be constantly negotiating contracts with various workplaces. If you don't have to join the union, then you starve the union economically. It has fewer resources with which to try to do the work and prevail and win concessions in the contract. And so you end up having a bunch of people who are free riders. Right? They get the benefits that the union negotiates for them. All the work that the unions do, they get to enjoy because they are in a workplace where the unions are recognized, but they're not paying for that work. The other workers who choose to join the unions are paying for the work. So the logic that the political right has, Republicans have, is that if you don't have to pay for it, you won't. Therefore, the unions will starve and they won't be able to be effectively pushing back on employers. They will eventually cease to exist. The Trump regime right now has a very strong push to try to undermine labor and the power of workers in this country. Project 2025 has a whole section on labor. They want to push a national right to work law, which would undermine unions everywhere. They also are rolling back at this moment. There was an executive order signed this week as I record this to try to roll back regulations in multiple agencies. And one of them is the Department of Labor. And it is focusing on workplace safety because it costs employers money to keep people safe on the job. And they don't want to have to spend that money. Why do we need unions? Well, if unions did not help workers, did not enhance their power, employers and those on the political right, Republicans who support them, would not be working so hard to try to kill unions. People with money and power do not give up either unless they are forced to. And that's why we need unions. Just think of the conditions we would all be working in now if we didn't have them.